Tonight, we will take a slow journey through the story of our planet, a story that began long before there were humans, long before there were animals or trees, or even an oxygen-filled sky. It is the story of Earth itself, a world that has lived many lives, carrying memories that stretch back for billions of years. As you settle in, allow your breathing to slow and your body to soften. There is nothing you need to do right now, but rest and listen. Think of this as a quiet voyage backward in time, a way of slipping into the ancient dreams of our planet. The Earth beneath us is not still. It is alive in ways we cannot always see. It holds the marks of ancient oceans, forgotten mountains, and skies that once looked nothing like the one we see above today. Let us begin at the beginning, in an age so far back that it feels almost like another universe. More than 4.5 billion years ago, Earth itself was born. In those early days, there were no forests, no seas of fish, and no gentle breezes. Instead, the world was molten and violent, a glowing sphere of rock hammered by countless collisions from space. Asteroids and comets rained down in endless showers, carrying with them heat, metal, and water. The skies were not blue. They may have glowed with thick clouds of gas, colored by volcanic fire and cosmic debris. It was a world unrecognizable to us, yet it was the beginning of everything. Slowly, the Earth cooled. The oceans gathered, not as calm blue waters, but as boiling seas, their surfaces steaming under a heavy atmosphere. The continents did not yet exist as we know them. Instead, rafts of crust floated, merged, and cracked apart again, restless and shifting. The moon, young and bright, hung closer in the sky than it does today, pulling the oceans into immense tides, shaping the rhythm of the early Earth. In those tides and in those seas, the first whispers of life would one day appear. Long before animals or plants, the Earth was a world ruled by chemistry. Volcanoes released gases that filled the air, and lightning split the skies in storms of fire. Simple molecules formed in these violent conditions, drifting through water and air. Some of them joined together, and over vast stretches of time, they began to organize into patterns that would one day become the first forms of life. In this sense, the Earth was a cradle, rocking gently through space, waiting patiently for life to awaken. Billions of years passed in silence. Life remained microscopic, invisible to the eye, and yet its presence began to transform the planet. The earliest living things may have been tiny cells clinging to vents on the ocean floor, feeding on heat and minerals. These cells learned to survive in places of boiling water and crushing pressure. Slowly, they spread through the seas, multiplying, changing, and adapting. They did not know it, but they were writing the first chapter of life's story, a story that would one day lead to forests, animals, and eventually to us. As these early microbes thrived, they began to change the air itself. Some of them learned to capture sunlight, using its energy to grow. In the process, they released oxygen as a byproduct. For millions of years, this oxygen drifted upward, filling the skies. At first, it was a poison to many forms of life. Entire populations vanished. But over time, the Earth's chemistry shifted. Oxygen combined with iron in the ocean, staining the rocks with deep red layers that can still be seen today. Eventually, the skies themselves transformed, becoming filled with the breathable air we depend on now. Imagine this transformation as you drift into calm. A world that once had an atmosphere of methane and carbon dioxide slowly clearing, the sky taking on its familiar blue, clouds drifting across it like soft sails. Imagine the oceans becoming calmer, reflecting that sky, their surfaces no longer green or hazy but deep and blue. It took billions of years for this to happen, but in the grand story of the Earth, time is patient. What feels eternal to us is just a moment to a planet that has lived for more than 4 billion years. During these long ages, the continents began to take shape. Land rose from the oceans, mountains formed, and rivers began their first journeys. Entire supercontinents came together, only to break apart again. The Earth's surface was never still. It was always moving, always shifting, as it continues to do even now. To think of this is to realize that the ground beneath your feet has not always been where it is. The stones around you may once have been part of another continent, drifting slowly across the globe before finding their place here. In the seas, life was growing more complex. Tiny single-celled organisms gave rise to colonies, and colonies became multicellular beings. Slowly, the first true plants appeared, floating in the water, capturing sunlight and releasing more oxygen into the air. With time, animals would follow, but in these early days, the Earth belonged to simple forms of life. Yet even in their simplicity, they were reshaping the planet, preparing it for what was to come. Think of how quiet it must have been then. No birds sang in the trees, because trees had not yet come. No insects buzzed because they did not exist. No mammals or reptiles stirred. The only sounds were the rush of wind, the crash of waves, and the rumble of volcanoes. It was a planet, breathing in silence, alive yet unpeopled, waiting through long ages. This silence is something we can still touch when we go to wild places, to deserts, to mountains, to deep caves, where the echoes remind us of Earth's ancient heart. As you rest tonight, let yourself imagine drifting back through this deep history. See the young Earth glowing, its seas steaming, its skies thick with storm. Then, watch as it cools, oceans settling into calm, life stirring in the shadows of vents on the ocean floor. Picture the slow rise of oxygen, the transformation of the air, the sky turning blue, the land rising from the sea. All of this happened long before humans, long before even the ancestors of animals, and yet it is part of the same story that leads to us. And so our journey begins. The Earth was once a molten world, then a world of storms, then a world of microbes, and then a world of oxygen and land. In its patience, it carried life forward, step by step, across billions of years. That story continues even now, and as you close your eyes, you are part of it, held gently in the rhythm of a planet that has always endured. Good night, and let your dreams carry you into those ancient oceans, into skies of other colors, into the calm silence of a world before humans. As we drift further into Earth's story, let us pause to imagine what the world was like after it began to settle from its fiery birth. The violent storms of rock and fire were calming, and the boiling seas that once steamed under heavy skies were beginning to cool. The Earth was still young, yet it was already shaping itself into a planet that could cradle life. The oceans grew vast, stretching across the globe, shimmering under a sun that was dimmer than the one we see today. Those early waters were not quiet, but they were alive with chemistry, the restless mixing of minerals, gases, and energy. The oceans in those times were very different from what we know now. They may have been tinted green from iron, or murky with sediment from constant volcanic eruptions. The air above was thick with carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrogen, giving the skies strange colors, perhaps red or orange at sunrise and sunset. The moon, closer than it is today, pulled on the seas with tides far larger than what we experience now. Waves may have risen to extraordinary heights, rolling across the shores and stirring the chemistry of shallow pools. It was in these pools and along these coasts that the first building blocks of life may have taken shape. The first life was not grand or complex. It did not walk or swim or grow tall. It was microscopic, invisible to the human eye, tiny cells clinging to cracks in the rocks, to vents on the ocean floor, to surfaces where energy could be captured. Imagine the deep sea in those ancient days. At volcanic vents, hot water rich with minerals poured into the ocean, creating dark clouds of chemicals. Around these vents, simple organisms thrived, feeding not on sunlight but on heat and minerals. They were the pioneers, the first living things to carve out an existence in a world that was still raw and unsettled. In time, some of these early microbes learned to capture sunlight. They spread across shallow waters, using the light of the young sun to grow. In doing so, they began to release oxygen, a gas that was not yet common in the atmosphere. At first, this oxygen did not fill the skies. Instead, it reacted with iron in the oceans, staining the seafloor with red layers that would one day become iron-rich rock. For millions upon millions of years, this quiet process continued. Slowly, oxygen built up, transforming the air above into something entirely new. This great oxygenation event was one of the most important moments in Earth's history, for it changed not only the skies, but also the possibilities for life itself. Picture how the Earth must have looked during this time. Vast oceans glimmered under alien skies. Strange mats of microbial colonies spread across tidal flats, forming what are now called stromatolites, layered structures that still exist in some places today. These colonies were alive, growing slowly, capturing sunlight, and exhaling oxygen. They had no awareness of the changes they were causing, yet their activity transformed the entire planet. They created the air that would one day allow animals, plants, and humans to breathe. Without their patient work, none of us would be here. The rise of oxygen was not peaceful for every form of life. For many microbes, oxygen was toxic, and as it spread through the oceans and skies, entire populations perished. In their place, new life forms adapted, finding ways to survive and even thrive in the presence of this new gas. This was a turning point, a shift that marked the end of one world and the beginning of another. The Earth had entered a new phase, its atmosphere forever altered by the quiet breath of countless microbes. During these ages, the continents were also changing. Land masses drifted, collided, and broke apart, pushed by the slow but constant movement of the Earth's crust. Volcanic eruptions shaped new islands. Mountains rose and wore down, rivers carved valleys into the land. From above, the Earth must have looked like a restless artist's canvas, painted and repainted by forces that never slept. These changes were slow, unfolding over millions of years, but in the grand timescales of the planet, they were as natural as breathing. Life in the seas responded to these changes. As oxygen grew more common, cells became more complex. Instead of existing alone, they began to work together, forming larger structures. The first multicellular organisms began to appear. They were simple, nothing like the animals we know today, but they marked the beginning of a new way of being alive. To imagine them is to picture tiny colonies of cells floating in the oceans, fragile yet resilient, carried by currents quietly multiplying. For billions of years, Earth remained a planet of microbes. There were no forests, no fish, no birds or mammals. The land was barren, the skies sometimes strange in color, the seas filled with life too small to see. And yet, in this simplicity, the foundation of all future life was laid. It was here, in these quiet ages, that the Earth prepared itself for the grandeur to come. The work of countless tiny organisms, patient and unnoticed, would one day make room for creatures of every size and shape. Think of the quiet patience of that time. Imagine standing on the shores of an ancient sea, waves rolling under a dim sun, the air heavy with gases, the land bare of plants. You would not hear birds or insects, only the wind, the water, and the distant rumble of volcanoes. Beneath the surface of the waves, invisible life was working, creating oxygen, shaping the air, changing the future. It was a world waiting, a world in transition, a world slowly learning how to breathe. This is the beauty of Earth's history. Every age prepared the way for the next. The violent birth of the planet created oceans. The oceans nurtured microbes. The microbes filled the skies with oxygen. The oxygen opened the door for more complex life. Each step took millions of years, yet each was part of a story that leads to us listening now. When we think of it this way, we see that we are connected not only to the animals and plants around us, but also to the earliest microbes that breathed life into the world. As you rest tonight, let this thought comfort you. The Earth has lived through fire and ice, silence and storms, and through it all, life has found a way to continue. You are part of that continuity, part of the same story that began in oceans billions of years ago. Breathe gently, knowing that your breath connects you to the breath of the ancient microbes, to the air they created, to the history of the world itself. The Earth remembers, and in your dreams, you can drift through those ancient seas, carried safely into the timeless calm of our planet's past. As the Earth continued its long journey through time, the seas and skies were slowly reshaped. But the land itself also began to tell new stories. The restless crust of the planet moved and shifted, breaking apart and coming together in cycles that spanned hundreds of millions of years. From this endless motion arose vast supercontinents, enormous landmasses that gathered nearly all the world's land into single connected regions. These supercontinents formed and broke apart many times before humans ever arrived, each one changing the climate, the oceans, and the possibilities for life. One of the earliest known supercontinents is called Volbra, which scientists believe existed more than 3 billion years ago. It would not have looked like any continent we know today. Its surface was barren, with no forests or animals, only bare rock and perhaps small microbial mats clinging to shallow shorelines. The air was heavy with gases and the sun was weaker than it is now, casting a pale light across the surface. Still, this first continent was the beginning of something new, the foundation of the landscapes that would one day support forests and creatures of unimaginable size. Later came Ur, a continent that may have formed more than 3 billion years ago and lasted for billions of years. It was small compared to later supercontinents, but it drifted across the globe, sometimes alone, sometimes joining with others. Imagine this world where the seas were still dominant, covering most of the surface, while isolated landmasses rose like islands of stone. The coastlines were long and winding, shaped by tides far stronger than today, since the moon was still closer to Earth than it is now. These shorelines were silent, without birds or crabs, or the sound of leaves rustling in the wind. They were places of stillness, broken only by waves and the hiss of volcanic steam. Over time, other supercontinents formed, each one part of a slow, patient cycle. Kennerland came together about 2.5 billion years ago. It stretched across much of the globe, altering currents in the oceans and creating climates unlike any that exist today. The surface of the land was still empty of animals and plants, but microbial life thrived in the seas. The skies were changing too, as oxygen from those tiny organisms continued to build. The Earth was learning how to breathe, and the continents were becoming the stage for new experiments in life. Rodinia followed, assembling about 1 billion years ago. This supercontinent was vast, stretching from pole to pole, a giant mass of land surrounded by a single global ocean. Imagine standing on one of its shores and looking out to sea. knowing that across the horizon lay the same unbroken expanse of water circling the globe. The climate during Rodinia's time was extreme. Some evidence suggests that the Earth may have entered a state of near total ice, a period sometimes called snowball Earth. During these times, ice sheets may have covered much of the land and even spread across the oceans near the equator. The world would have been dazzling and silent, its surface gleaming under a pale sun. Life in the oceans survived, clinging to cracks in the ice or to warm vents in the seafloor, waiting for the thaw that would eventually come. The cycle continued with Pannotia, which existed about 600 million years ago. Unlike earlier barren lands, Pannotia witnessed the beginnings of complex life in the seas. By this time, multicellular organisms were appearing, soft-bodied creatures drifting in the oceans, marking the first steps toward the Cambrian explosion of diversity that was soon to follow. The continents, though still empty of plants and animals, were no longer lifeless in their influence. Their positions and shapes controlled the currents of the seas, the circulation of nutrients, and the rhythms of climate. They were silent architects shaping the conditions in which life would grow. Eventually, Pangaea formed, perhaps the most famous of all supercontinents, though it came much later, hundreds of millions of years before humans. But long before Pangaea, the earlier supercontinents had already set the stage, shaping the Earth's landscapes, teaching the planet the rhythm of assembling and breaking apart. Each cycle of collision and separation altered the face of the Earth, creating mountains, basins, rivers, and coastlines. These slow movements, though invisible in a human lifetime, were constant in their patience, a reminder that the Earth is never truly still. As you imagine these ancient worlds, let yourself picture their silence. The continents were bare rock, their surfaces sculpted by wind, rain, and ice, but with no trees to anchor the soil, no animals to roam the land. The only life was in the oceans, microscopic and hidden. To walk across such a continent would be to walk in utter quiet, hearing only the sound of your own footsteps, the wind against the stone, and the distant crash of the sea. It was a world empty of voices but full of potential. And yet, even in that emptiness, beauty existed. Imagine the colors of the rocks, fresh and unweathered. Imagine volcanoes glowing in the distance, rivers cutting their first paths, glaciers carving valleys that no creature would see for millions of years. Imagine the stars above, shining in skies untouched by light from cities or fires. The night sky would have been vast and brilliant, filled with constellations long forgotten, their light reflecting in oceans that stretched unbroken to the horizon. The supercontinents also shaped the deep interior of the Earth. As plates collided, mountains rose higher than any that exist today. As they pulled apart, rift valleys opened, creating new seas. These changes influenced the circulation of the atmosphere and oceans, setting the stage for the great climate shifts that would follow. In this way, the continents were not just land, but engines of change, guiding the future of life in ways that could not be seen at the time. Think of how slow this dance was. Continents drift at the pace that fingernails grow, only a few centimeters each year. Yet, over millions of years, those tiny movements reshaped the entire planet. They brought land together and tore it apart, creating endless new coastlines and endless new possibilities. This patience is the rhythm of the Earth itself, a rhythm far slower than our daily lives but far steadier, a rhythm that continues even now beneath our feet. As you rest, imagine being carried back to one of those ancient continents. You stand on barren rock, looking out across a sea that circles the world. The wind is cool, the sky perhaps tinted a strange hue from gases unlike those of today. There is no sound but nature's own, no voices, no footsteps, but your own. And yet, beneath the surface of the oceans, life is stirring, simple yet determined, ready to take the next steps in its long journey. The earth is waiting, patient and timeless, holding its breath for the future. So let this vision soothe you. The continents have always moved, the oceans have always shifted, and life has always found a way to endure. We are part of that same story, a story that began long before humans, a story still unfolding now. Sleep in the knowledge that the earth carries its history gently, and that you too are carried within that history, safe in the arms of a planet that has always known how to endure. By the time Earth had seen billions of years pass, the world was preparing for one of its greatest transformations. Life, once simple and hidden, began to grow more complex. The oceans, which had long been filled only with tiny single-celled organisms, were now the cradle of new forms. Cells joined together, forming bodies that could move, sense, and grow in ways far beyond their ancestors. This quiet revolution in the seas would lay the foundation for every animal that has ever lived, from the smallest insect to the largest whale. The first steps toward complexity began with cooperation. Single cells, which had spent billions of years living alone, learned to work together in colonies. At first, these colonies were loose, a collection of cells bound side by side. But over time, they began to specialize, with different cells taking on different tasks. Some became better at capturing energy, others at movement, others at protection. This division of labor allowed the colonies to become something greater than the sum of their parts. In time, these colonies evolved into the first true multicellular organisms. Imagine drifting through the seas of this ancient world. The water is filled with tiny shapes, most too small to see. But among them are new beings, larger and more complex than anything that came before. They float gently in the currents, fragile yet extraordinary, experiments in the art of life. These creatures had no bones, no shells, nothing that would fossilize easily, but they left behind impressions in ancient rocks, faint outlines of their soft bodies. These are the earliest traces of animals, the ancestors of everything that would follow. One of the most remarkable periods in Earth's history soon followed, a time we now call the Cambrian explosion. Beginning around 540 million years ago, life suddenly blossomed into an astonishing diversity of forms. In a relatively short span of time, measured in tens of millions of years, the seas filled with creatures of every shape and size. Animals developed eyes to see, mouths to bite, and limbs to move. Predators appeared for the first time, chasing and consuming other creatures, driving evolution forward in a new and dramatic way. Picture the oceans during this explosion of life. The seafloor was no longer a quiet place of microbial mats. Instead, it was alive with movement. Trilobites scuttled across the sand, their armored bodies gleaming in the dim light. Worm-like creatures burrowed through the mud, leaving winding trails behind them. Spiny predators floated and darted, hunting with strange jaws and grasping limbs. Above them, other animals swam with fins and tails, exploring the open water. It was as though the earth had suddenly discovered creativity, filling the seas with experiments in form and function. Many of these creatures would not survive the ages. They were evolutionary trials, branches of the tree of life that ended as quickly as they began. Yet some lineages endured. The ancestors of modern arthropods, mollusks, and vertebrates first appeared in this time. The seeds of future fish, insects, and even humans were planted in the Cambrian seas. The world had moved from simplicity to complexity, from stillness to motion, from invisibility to vivid abundance. The appearance of eyes was especially transformative. Before eyes, life had moved slowly, guided only by touch and chemistry. With eyes, creatures could see the world around them. They could recognize light and shadow, movement and stillness. They could chase prey and flee from predators. The invention of vision reshaped evolution, leading to new defenses, new strategies, and new ways of living. The seas became a stage of drama, filled with pursuit, escape, and survival. But even as life grew more complex, the land remained barren. The continents, vast and silent, were still empty of plants and animals. Rocks, sand, and wind shaped their surfaces, with no forests to hold the soil or roots to anchor the ground. From above, the earth would have looked strange, its continents bare and its oceans alive with hidden wonders. The contrast between land and sea was striking, a reminder that life's journey had only just begun. Over the next hundreds of millions of years, life in the oceans continued to evolve. Shells and skeletons appeared, offering protection and leaving behind fossils that we can still find today. Coral-like organisms began to build reefs, creating structures that sheltered countless creatures. Fish grew stronger, their bodies streamlined for speed, their jaws powerful for feeding. The diversity of life expanded, filling every niche in the oceans. The continents, though still barren, played their role in this unfolding story. Rivers carried minerals into the seas, feeding the growth of organisms. Tides stirred the coasts, mixing nutrients and energy. Volcanic eruptions shaped the climate, sometimes warming, sometimes cooling, creating challenges that life had to overcome. Through it all, the Earth remained a patient teacher, offering both obstacles and opportunities for life to grow. Mass extinctions also punctuated this history. Catastrophic events wiped out large portions of life more than once, reshaping the balance of species. Each time, the survivors adapted and new forms arose. Extinction, though tragic, was also a driver of creativity, opening space for fresh experiments in evolution. This pattern of loss and renewal became part of the rhythm of life on Earth, a reminder that even in endings, new beginnings can arise. Imagine again the ancient seas. Picture trilobites scuttling across the sand, fish-like creatures darting through the water, and soft-bodied animals drifting gently in the currents. Picture reefs rising like underwater cities, filled with life in every crevice. The oceans were bustling with activity, while the land above remained silent, waiting for its turn. To witness such a world would be to step into a dream where every shape of life was new and strange, yet beautiful in its variety. As you let these images settle in your mind, notice how each step in Earth's story builds upon the last. The formation of continents created new environments. The rise of oxygen made new forms of life possible. The cooperation of cells led to bodies. The invention of vision led to movement and survival. Each step was part of a chain, leading forward in time, shaping the Earth into the world we know today. And so, as you rest, you can take comfort in this continuity. Life has always found ways to adapt, to grow, to thrive. Even in the darkest times, even in the face of extinctions, life has endured. You are part of that endurance, part of the same story that began with tiny cells in the oceans billions of years ago. The Earth carries you as it has carried every form of life before, gently and patiently. Close your eyes now and imagine floating through the Cambrian seas, surrounded by strange creatures that no longer exist. Let their gentle movement lull you, their ancient presence soothe you. Know that you are connected to them, to the Earth that created them, and to the story that continues even now. The oceans whisper their secrets, and in their whispers, you can find peace. The oceans had long been the cradle of life, but eventually, the story of Earth began to shift toward the land. For billions of years, the continents had been barren, shaped only by wind, water, and fire. There were no forests, no meadows, and no animals to cross their rocky surfaces. Yet slowly, life found its way onto the shorelines, creeping outward from the seas that had nurtured it for so long. This movement from water to land was one of the most profound transitions in Earth's history, for it set the stage for every forest, every insect, every bird and mammal that would one day walk or fly above the ground. The first steps were taken not by animals but by plants. Long before trees and flowers, the earliest plant-like organisms began to settle along the edges of rivers and coastlines. These were small, simple, and fragile, more like moss than grass or shrubs. They clung to damp rock and soil, capturing sunlight and releasing oxygen into the air. Their presence was modest, but it changed everything. With their growth, the continents were no longer barren. They began to turn green, their surfaces softened by living carpets that spread slowly but steadily. These early plants reshaped the earth. They anchored soil, preventing it from washing away in rain. They helped create new layers of fertile ground, preparing the land for future growth. They also altered the atmosphere, increasing the levels of oxygen and changing the balance of gases. Their work made the land more hospitable, paving the way for animals that would one day follow. In this way, the continents themselves began to awaken, no longer silent expanses of rock but landscapes touched by life. The animals that ventured onto land were at first tentative and few. Some arthropods, distant relatives of insects and crabs, were among the first explorers. They crawled onto the shorelines, perhaps seeking food or safety. They were followed by early relatives of scorpions and millipedes, strange creatures by our standards but pioneers in their time. These animals faced immense challenges. The air was dry compared to water, and their bodies had to adapt to avoid losing moisture. Gravity pressed more heavily on them without the buoyant support of the sea. And yet, they managed to endure, their presence marking the beginning of life's conquest of the land. Imagine the Earth during this age. The continents were still largely barren, with vast stretches of rock, sand, and soil untouched by vegetation. Here and there, patches of green appeared where early plants grew. Along the shores, strange animals scuttled, their movements tentative, their forms unlike anything familiar to us today. The air would have been thick and humid, filled with gases that had only recently begun to resemble the balance we now breathe. It was a world in transition, caught between the silence of its ancient past and the vibrant life that was still to come. As plants grew taller and more complex, they began to shape entire ecosystems. Some developed roots to draw water from the soil, while others developed stems to lift their leaves higher toward the sun. These changes allowed them to spread farther inland, covering more of the continents. With plants came shade, shelter, and food, creating opportunities for new animals to follow. The land was no longer an empty stage. It was becoming a place where life could thrive. One of the most extraordinary developments of this time was the rise of forests. Ancient trees, tall and spore-bearing, appeared and began to form dense woodlands. These forests transformed the land, their roots digging deep into the soil, their leaves reaching high into the sky. They created habitats for insects and other animals, and they altered the atmosphere once again, increasing oxygen to levels higher than ever before. For a time, the Earth's air may have been richer in oxygen than it is today, allowing creatures to grow larger and more active. Among the first vertebrates to venture onto land were amphibian-like animals, descended from fish that had developed strong fins capable of supporting their weight in shallow water. Some of these fins gradually evolved into limbs, allowing the animals to crawl onto muddy banks and breathe air through primitive lungs. These pioneers were awkward and slow, but they represented a turning point. For the first time, vertebrates had set foot on land, beginning a lineage that would one day lead to reptiles, mammals, and eventually humans. The Earth was changing in both appearance and sound. For billions of years, the continents had been silent, but now they echoed with new life. Insects buzzed among plants, amphibian-like creatures croaked and crawled in marshes, winds rustled through the leaves of forests, rivers carried seeds inland, spreading plants farther from the seas. The once barren continents were becoming landscapes of life, filled with color, movement, and sound. This transformation did not happen quickly. It took hundreds of millions of years for plants to spread across the land and for animals to adapt to terrestrial life. Many species tried and failed, leaving no descendants. But those that survived created entirely new ecosystems, new ways of living, and new possibilities for evolution. The Earth had become a planet of both sea and land, a world of expanding diversity. The rise of land life also influenced the oceans. Plants drew carbon dioxide from the air, changing the chemistry of the atmosphere and oceans. Forests provided nutrients that washed into rivers and seas, fueling new forms of growth. The balance between land and sea became more connected, each influencing the other in ways that shaped the planet's climate and its living systems. Imagine walking through one of those early forests. The trees are tall but strange, with no flowers or fruits, only spore-bearing cones and leaves. The ground is damp and soft, covered with ferns and moss-like plants. Giant insects crawl among the roots, larger than any seen today, their bodies thriving in the oxygen-rich air. Strange amphibian-like creatures lurk in shallow pools, their eyes watching from the water's edge. The air is heavy and warm, filled with the scent of damp earth and growing plants. It is a world familiar in some ways, yet alien in others, a glimpse of Earth in a time long before humans. As you let this image rest in your mind, notice how each step of Earth's story builds upon the last. The oceans nurtured life for billions of years. The plants transformed the land. The insects and amphibians followed. Forests rose, and the continents came alive. Each step was slow and patient, yet each reshaped the planet in profound ways. And now, as you drift toward sleep, let yourself imagine that transformation. See the barren continents slowly turning green. Watch as forests spread across valleys and mountains. Picture insects buzzing in the humid air, amphibians crawling onto the shore, rivers carrying life deeper inland. It is a reminder that the Earth is always changing, always creating, always moving forward in its story. You are part of that story too, resting now in the quiet of a planet that has carried life for billions of years. By the time plants and animals had firmly established themselves on land, the Earth was entering one of its most extraordinary ages. Vast forests covered the continents, rivers carried life deep inland, and the air was rich with oxygen, thicker than it is today. This oxygen-rich atmosphere allowed creatures to grow to sizes that feel almost impossible now. Insects reached wingspans as wide as birds, and amphibians stretched into hulking forms that prowled swamps and marshes. The world was lush, humid, and alive with creatures that seemed both familiar and alien. The Carboniferous period, which began more than 300 million years ago, was a time when the land truly bloomed. Towering trees rose in dense forests, their trunks straight and tall, their leaves creating canopies that filtered the sunlight into dim green light below. These were not trees like the ones we know today. They did not bear flowers or fruits. Instead, they spread spores through the air, relying on damp environments to reproduce. Beneath them grew ferns and horsetails, plants that thrived in the steamy climate. Together, they formed landscapes of endless greenery, a living tapestry stretching across continents. Insects flourished in this world. Dragonflies with wingspans larger than a hawk's glided through the air, their delicate wings shimmering in the filtered light. Millipedes longer than a human stretched across the forest floor, their countless legs carrying them over moss and roots. Spiders and scorpions grew massive in the oxygen-rich air, thriving in the dark undergrowth. The forests were alive with movement, every corner buzzing, crawling, and rustling with life. Amphibians also grew to impressive sizes. Some reached lengths of several meters, their bodies thick and muscular, their jaws wide enough to snap up fish and smaller creatures. These amphibians were the rulers of the swamps, moving between water and land with ease. They lived in rivers, lakes, and marshes, their presence shaping the ecosystems around them. Some had flat, broad heads and sprawling limbs, while others were more slender and adapted for swimming. They were diverse and successful, filling many roles in the ancient environment. The swamps of this era were unlike anything that exists today. Imagine walking through them, though no human ever did. The air is heavy and humid, thick with the scent of wet soil and vegetation. The ground is soft and spongy, covered in fallen leaves and roots. Towering trees rise above, their trunks smooth and bare until branches spread into crowns of greenery far overhead. Sunlight filters through, creating patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor. Insects hum and click, their wings flashing as they dart among the trees. Giant dragonflies sweep past, their bodies gliding silently in the air. Beneath the water, amphibians stir, their eyes breaking the surface as they watch for prey. It is a world both vibrant and eerie, full of abundance, but also mystery. One of the most remarkable things about this time is how it shaped the earth we live on today. The dense forests of the Carboniferous period absorbed enormous amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. As trees and plants died, they fell into swampy ground where oxygen was scarce. Instead of rotting away quickly, their remains accumulated layer upon layer, buried under sediment. Over millions of years, heat and pressure transformed these layers into coal, the very coal that humans would one day burn to power cities and machines. In this way, the forests of long ago continue to influence our lives even now. Reptiles also began to appear during this time. Unlike amphibians, which had to stay near water to lay their eggs, reptiles developed a new adaptation, the amniotic egg, protected by a shell. This allowed them to move farther inland, free from the limits of swamps and rivers. With this innovation, reptiles began to spread across the land, exploring drier habitats that amphibians could not reach. They were still small in these early days, but they carried within them the potential to grow into dinosaurs, birds, and mammals in the ages to come. The forests, the insects, the amphibians, and the first reptiles created a balance that defined this age. The land was no longer empty, but filled with ecosystems as complex as those in the seas. Each species played its role, and together they formed a world of abundance. Yet the Earth's history is always marked by change, and even these great forests would one day vanish. Toward the end of the Carboniferous period, climates began to shift. The Earth cooled, and glaciers grew near the poles. The atmosphere changed, and oxygen levels began to fall. The vast swamps shrank, and many of the giant insects and amphibians that had thrived in them disappeared. Reptiles, better adapted to drier conditions, began to spread and diversify, taking advantage of the new environments. The great forests dwindled, leaving behind the coal beds that still hold their memory. Imagine watching these changes unfold over millions of years. Forests that once stretched endlessly across continents begin to shrink, swamps dry, and the air grows less humid. Giant dragonflies vanish from the skies, their time ending as the conditions that allowed their size fade away. Amphibians retreat to smaller habitats, their dominance waning. Reptiles, once small and overlooked, begin to take their place, creeping into new lands, laying their eggs safely away from water. The balance shifts once again, as it always does on Earth. This is the rhythm of the planet. Life flourishes, adapts, and changes. No age lasts forever, but each leaves behind traces that shape what comes after. The forests of the Carboniferous period left coal. The amphibians left descendants. The reptiles began a lineage that would dominate the Earth in the form of dinosaurs for more than 150 million years. Nothing is lost entirely. It is transformed, carried forward, written into the next chapter of the planet's story. As you rest, imagine drifting through one of those ancient swamps. The air is thick and warm, the trees rising high above you. A giant dragonfly glides past, its wings shimmering in the light. The sound of countless insects fills the air, a steady hum that blends into the background. In the water nearby, a massive amphibian stirs, slipping silently beneath the surface. All around you, life is abundant, larger and stranger than anything we know today. This world is gone, but in your imagination, it still lives. A dream of Earth before humans, carried gently into the present. So let these images soothe you. The Earth has always been alive with change, always shifting from one balance to another. Each age brings new wonders, new forms, and new stories. The forests, insects, amphibians, and reptiles of the Carboniferous period were once the rulers of the land, and though they are gone, their legacy remains. Sleep now in the comfort of knowing that the Earth is timeless, that its history is vast, and that you are part of its unbroken story. As the Carboniferous forests began to shrink and the climate shifted, the balance of life on Earth changed once again. Amphibians, which had thrived in the humid swamps, began to lose their dominance. In their place, reptiles rose to prominence. These creatures, with their remarkable adaptation of the amniotic egg, could survive in drier environments, no longer tied to the water for reproduction. With this freedom, they spread across the continents, exploring new lands and thriving in ways amphibians could not. This was the beginning of a new dynasty, one that would eventually give rise to some of the most iconic animals the Earth has ever seen. The early reptiles were small and unassuming. They looked like lizards in some ways, their bodies low to the ground, their scales protecting them from drying out. But within them lay the potential for incredible diversity. Some remained small, while others evolved into massive creatures. Some stayed on 4 legs, while others would eventually take to the skies. In these early ages, reptiles were simply survivors, but they would one day rule the land, the seas, and even the air. During the Permian period, which began more than 290 million years ago, reptiles truly began to diversify. The continents had gathered into a single vast landmass called Pangaea. This supercontinent stretched from pole to pole, creating deserts in its interior and vast coastlines along its edges. The climate was extreme, with hot summers, cold winters, and little rainfall in many regions. These harsh conditions were difficult for amphibians, but reptiles thrived. Their scales protected them from the dry air, and their eggs allowed them to reproduce far from water. They spread across Pangaea, adapting to deserts, forests, and plains. Some reptiles of this time grew into fearsome predators. Dimetrodon, for example, was a reptile with a long sail of skin stretched across its back, supported by tall spines. It was not a dinosaur, but an earlier reptile relative, a top predator of its time. Its sail may have helped regulate its body temperature, absorbing heat from the sun in the morning and releasing it when the day grew hot. With powerful jaws and sharp teeth, it hunted smaller creatures, ruling the ecosystems of its age. Other reptiles became herbivores, feeding on the growing forests of plants. These plant eaters grew large, their size protecting them from predators. Some had broad, flat teeth for grinding vegetation, while others developed unique features to help them process tough plants. Together, predators and herbivores created a balance that sustained the ecosystems of the Permian. The Earth itself was changing as well. The climate grew harsher, with deserts spreading across the interior of Pangaea. The shifting of continents created mountain ranges, rivers, and basins. Volcanic activity altered the air and temperature, sometimes releasing vast amounts of gas into the atmosphere. Life was forced to adapt to these constant changes, and reptiles proved especially resilient. But the end of the Permian period brought one of the greatest crises in Earth's history. Around 252 million years ago, a massive extinction event swept across the planet. Volcanoes erupted on a scale unimaginable today, releasing gases that warmed the climate, poisoned the air, and acidified the oceans. More than 90% of species vanished in what is often called the Great Dying. Forests collapsed, reefs disappeared, and countless animals and plants were lost. It was the most severe extinction event the Earth has ever experienced. And yet, even in this darkest time, life endured. Some reptiles survived the catastrophe, carrying forward the spark of life into the next era. These survivors were the ancestors of the dinosaurs, the crocodiles, and eventually the birds. Out of devastation came renewal, as it so often does in the Earth's story. The extinction cleared the stage, allowing new forms of life to rise in the Triassic period that followed. The Triassic world was a place of recovery and innovation. The land, still gathered into Pangaea, was hot and dry, but plants began to spread once again. Forests of conifers, cycads, and ferns covered the land, providing food and shelter for the creatures that endured. Reptiles diversified into many forms, from small lizard-like animals to large, lumbering herbivores. Some evolved into the first true dinosaurs, small and swift at first, but destined to grow into giants. Others returned to the seas, adapting to life in the water with streamlined bodies and fins. The oceans, once devastated, began to fill again with life. Imagine standing on the shores of a Triassic sea. The land behind you is dotted with conifer trees and ferns, while the water before you ripples with strange new creatures. Long-necked reptiles swim gracefully, their bodies gliding through the waves. Smaller animals scurry across the rocks, their claws gripping tightly. Above, the air is hot and dry, carrying the scent of plants and soil. It is a world rebuilding itself, life returning in new forms, determined to continue. The first dinosaurs appeared during this time, though they were not yet the giants they would one day become. They were small, agile, and quick, using their speed to hunt insects and small animals or to escape larger predators. Their success was not immediate, but their adaptability gave them an advantage that would serve them well in the ages to come. Alongside them, other reptiles also thrived, including the ancestors of crocodiles and turtles. The diversity of forms was astonishing, a sign that life was once again experimenting with new designs. In the oceans, reptiles like ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs took to the water. Ichthyosaurs resembled dolphins, with sleek bodies and long snouts filled with teeth. They swam swiftly, hunting fish and squid. Plesiosaurs had long necks and broad bodies, moving gracefully through the seas. These marine reptiles filled niches left empty by the extinction, proving once again that life finds a way to adapt and endure. As you imagine these ancient worlds, notice the rhythm of change. The forests of the Carboniferous gave way to the reptiles of the Permian. The Great Dying swept much of life away, but survivors carried the spark forward. The Triassic became a time of renewal, a time when dinosaurs first appeared, when reptiles filled the seas, and when the earth once again became rich with life. Each age ends, but each ending opens the door to a new beginning. So, as you rest, think of the resilience of life. Imagine standing on Pangaea, the vast supercontinent stretching endlessly, deserts to one side, forests to another, seas surrounding all. Picture reptiles crawling across the land, some small and quick, others large and fearsome. Picture forests of conifers swaying in the wind, rivers cutting through valleys, mountains rising in the distance. Above all, picture the patience of the earth, carrying life through extinctions and recoveries, through losses and rebirths. Let this vision soothe you as you drift toward sleep. The earth has always endured, and life has always found a way. From small reptiles on barren land to the first dinosaurs in the Triassic seas, the story continues, carrying us forward through time. Close your eyes and rest in the knowledge that you are part of that same story, safe in the embrace of a planet that has always known how to endure. By the time the Triassic period gave way to the Jurassic, the Earth had once again transformed. The long struggle of recovery after the Great Dying was complete, and life was flourishing with a vibrancy never before seen. Forests of tall conifers and cycads stretched across the land, rivers wound through valleys, and warm, shallow seas covered lowlands. The climate was warm and humid, and the continents were beginning to drift apart from the great mass of Pangaea. Into this world stepped the dinosaurs, creatures that would rise from small beginnings to dominate the planet for more than 150 million years. The earliest dinosaurs were small, nimble animals. They were not yet the towering giants of later ages, but instead quick runners with long legs and tails. Some were meat-eaters, chasing after smaller reptiles and insects. Others fed on plants, their teeth adapted for cropping leaves. Their success lay not in their size but in their adaptability. They moved lightly, reproduced quickly, and found ways to thrive in a variety of habitats. As the Triassic ended and the Jurassic began, these humble beginnings gave rise to the mighty creatures that would one day rule the earth. During the Jurassic, dinosaurs expanded into many forms. Some grew to sizes that dwarfed anything that had come before. Sauropods, with their long necks and tails, became the largest animals ever to walk the land. They roamed in herds, their massive bodies moving slowly but steadily as they stripped leaves from the tallest trees. Imagine seeing a group of these giants moving across a plain, their necks swaying like great bridges, their footsteps shaking the ground. They were living mountains, yet gentle in their way, their size itself a protection from most predators. Alongside the sauropods came predators that grew to meet the challenge of hunting such large animals. Creatures like Allosaurus patrolled the forests and plains, their sharp teeth and powerful limbs making them formidable hunters. They may have hunted in groups, though some likely hunted alone, their presence shaping the behavior of the herbivores around them. The balance between predator and prey was played out on a grand scale, with each side driving the other to adapt and survive. But dinosaurs were not the only creatures to thrive in this age. The seas were filled with marine reptiles such as plesiosaurs, with their long necks and wide bodies, and ichthyosaurs, which resembled dolphins with long tooth-filled snouts. These creatures swam gracefully, hunting fish and squid, ruling the oceans just as dinosaurs ruled the land. Above, the skies began to fill with pterosaurs, flying reptiles that soared on wings of skin stretched across elongated fingers. Some were small and agile, darting through the air like modern birds, while others grew enormous, with wingspans wider than a small airplane. The age of dinosaurs was not only about the land, but about the oceans and skies as well, a complete dominance of the Earth's environments. The Jurassic period was also a time of lush vegetation. Forests of conifers and ferns spread across the continents, providing endless food for herbivores. Cycads and ginkgo trees grew tall, their leaves creating dense canopies. Beneath them, ferns and mosses carpeted the ground. The air was rich with moisture and warmth, creating climates where life could flourish in abundance. Rivers wound through forests, and great floodplains stretched into the distance, offering grazing land for the giant sauropods. The continents themselves were changing. Pangaea, once united, was beginning to split apart. Cracks in the crust opened into rift valleys which filled with seas. The Atlantic Ocean was beginning to form, though it was narrow at first, a young ocean that would widen over millions of years. This breaking apart of continents created new coastlines, new climates, and new opportunities for life. Dinosaurs adapted to these changes, spreading into new regions and diversifying even further. One of the most fascinating aspects of this time was the development of feathers in some dinosaurs. Feathers may have begun as simple filaments used for insulation rather than flight. Over time, they became more complex, developing into structures that could aid in display, camouflage, or even gliding. Though true birds would not appear until later, the seeds of flight were already present. Picture a small feathered dinosaur darting through the undergrowth, its body covered in a soft coat that hinted at the wings to come. In these humble beginnings lay the promise of future skies filled with birdsong. The Jurassic seas were equally rich with life. Coral reefs grew in warm, shallow waters, creating vibrant ecosystems filled with fish, mollusks, and crustaceans. Ammonites, with their spiral shells, floated through the oceans, their numbers so vast that their fossils can still be found in abundance today. Sharks patrolled the waters, their forms already similar to the ones we know today. It was a world of abundance, every niche filled with life, every environment alive with movement. Imagine drifting through this Jurassic world. You walk beneath towering trees, their trunks stretching high above, their leaves swaying in the warm breeze. A herd of sauropods moves slowly across a plain, their long necks reaching into the treetops. In the distance, a predator watches, its eyes gleaming, its muscles tense. Overhead, pterosaurs glide gracefully, their wings casting shadows on the ground below. In a nearby river, fish dart beneath the surface, while in the deeper seas, plesiosaurs glide through the water, their long necks weaving as they chase their prey. Everywhere you look, life abounds, strange yet familiar, vast yet detailed. The Jurassic was a golden age for the dinosaurs, but it was not without challenges. Climate shifts and volcanic eruptions occasionally disrupted ecosystems. Species rose and fell, some disappearing while others took their place. Yet the overall balance remained, and dinosaurs continued to thrive. The Earth, as always, was a place of change, but it was also a place of resilience. Life endured, adapted, and expanded into every corner of the planet. As you reflect on this age, let its images soothe you. Think of the patience of the Earth, carrying life through countless transformations. Think of the dinosaurs, rising from small beginnings to become giants. Think of the seas, alive with ancient reptiles and ammonites. Think of the skies, filled with the beating wings of pterosaurs. Each detail is part of a grand story, a story that has unfolded for hundreds of millions of years, a story that leads to us listening now. So as you rest, let yourself drift into that ancient world. Walk among the forests, watch the herds move across the plains, feel the quiet power of a planet alive with possibility. The dinosaurs may be gone, but their legacy remains, not only in the fossils beneath our feet, but also in the birds that still sing today. Sleep peacefully, knowing that the earth remembers all of its ages, and that you are part of the same story, carried forward by time, safe in the embrace of a world that has always endured. As the Jurassic world gave way to the Cretaceous, the Earth entered a time of great abundance and profound change. Dinosaurs had already grown into giants, but in the Cretaceous they reached even greater variety and power. New plants transformed the landscapes, oceans swelled with strange creatures, and the skies filled not only with pterosaurs, but also with the first true birds. It was a time of richness, a world bursting with life in every direction, yet also one slowly moving toward an ending that would reshape the planet forever. The Cretaceous period began about 145 million years ago and lasted until 66 million years ago. During this long span, the continents drifted farther apart, breaking away from the unity of Pangaea. The Atlantic Ocean widened, and new seas flooded lowlands, creating warm, shallow waters that stretched across continents. These inland seas were filled with life, from enormous marine reptiles to swarms of ammonites and schools of fish. The earth was warm, humid, and lush, a greenhouse world where plants and animals thrived. One of the most important transformations of this time was the rise of flowering plants. Before the Cretaceous, forests had been dominated by conifers, cycads, and ferns. Now, new plants appeared that bore flowers, fruits, and seeds encased in protective coverings. These plants spread quickly, reshaping ecosystems. Their flowers attracted insects, beginning a partnership that continues today as bees, beetles, and butterflies evolved alongside them. Their fruits provided food for animals, carrying seeds far and wide. The world became more colorful, more diverse, and more complex as flowering plants transformed landscapes into meadows, groves, and forests unlike any before. Dinosaurs adapted to this new abundance. Herbivores grew even larger and more varied. Hadrosaurs, often called duck-billed dinosaurs, filled the plains, grazing on plants in vast herds. They developed elaborate crests on their heads, perhaps for making sounds to communicate or to attract mates. Ceratopsians like Triceratops evolved massive frills and horns, both for defense and for display. Ankylosaurs became living tanks, their bodies covered in armor plates and their tails ending in heavy clubs. Each group adapted in its own way, shaping a world filled with diversity and movement. Predators grew equally impressive. Tyrannosaurus rex, one of the most famous dinosaurs of all time, appeared in the late Cretaceous. With jaws powerful enough to crush bone and teeth longer than a human hand, it was among the largest land predators that ever lived. Raptors, smaller but swift and intelligent, hunted in packs, using sharp claws and keen senses to chase prey. Each predator had its own strategy, and together they kept the balance of life in motion, ensuring that herbivores and plants never grew unchecked. The skies were alive as well. Pterosaurs continued to thrive, some reaching enormous sizes. Imagine a flying reptile with a wingspan longer than a small airplane, gliding effortlessly above forests and seas. Alongside them, the first true birds appeared. Descended from small feathered dinosaurs, these birds had wings, feathers, and the ability to fly with greater control than pterosaurs. Their songs may have begun to fill the air, adding sound to the world in ways never heard before. The skies, once silent, had become a place of music and grace. The seas of the Cretaceous were equally remarkable. Enormous reptiles ruled the waters, including mosasaurs, sleek predators with long bodies and powerful tails. They hunted fish, squid, and even other marine reptiles, their presence dominating the oceans. Plesiosaurs still swam with their long necks, while ichthyosaurs, though once abundant, began to fade. Ammonites drifted through the seas in countless numbers, their spiral shells gleaming as they floated. Sharks patrolled the depths, already ancient in their lineage, and fish schools shimmered like living clouds. The oceans were as full of drama and beauty as the land above. Imagine walking across a Cretaceous plain. The air is warm and heavy, filled with the scent of flowering plants. A herd of hadrosaurs grazes nearby, their crests rising and falling as they call to one another. In the distance, a triceratops lifts its massive head, its frill catching the sunlight as it watches for danger. Overhead, a pterosaur glides silently, its shadow sweeping across the ground. The ground trembles slightly as a massive Tyrannosaurus approaches, its steps deliberate, its eyes fixed on the herds. The world is alive with sound, motion, and color, every corner filled with life. The Cretaceous was not only a time of abundance but also of change. Volcanoes erupted, shaping the climate and enriching soils. Sea levels rose and fell, creating shifting coastlines. Temperatures fluctuated, forcing species to adapt, and yet life endured, continuing to grow and diversify. The Earth had seen extinctions before, but in this moment it was a place of extraordinary richness, as though the planet itself was alive with imagination. And yet, deep in the future of this period lay an ending unlike any other. About 66 million years ago, an asteroid struck the Earth with unimaginable force, landing near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact released energy greater than billions of nuclear explosions, sending shockwaves across the planet. Fires raged, tsunamis swept coastlines, and a cloud of dust and ash rose into the atmosphere, blocking the sun for months or even years. Plants withered, animals starved, and ecosystems collapsed. In this single moment, the age of dinosaurs came to an end. But that ending is still ahead in our story. For most of the Cretaceous, the Earth was vibrant and alive, a place where dinosaurs, plants, insects, birds, and marine reptiles thrived together. It was a world of abundance, a world that reminds us of the creativity of life and the resilience of the planet. Even knowing what came later, the Cretaceous stands as one of Earth's greatest ages, a time when life reached heights of diversity and grandeur that still inspire awe today. As you drift toward sleep, let yourself imagine this Cretaceous world. Walk among flowering plants, their blossoms glowing in the sun. Listen to the calls of hadrosaurs, deep and resonant, carrying across the plains. Watch a triceratops grazing quietly, its horns gleaming as it moves. Feel the air tremble with the beating wings of a giant pterosaur overhead. Look to the seas, where mosasaurs glide through the depths, their bodies powerful and sleek. It is a world filled with motion, with sound, with color, a dream of Earth long before humans. And in that dream, take comfort in the patience of the Earth. Ages rise and fall, but the story continues. Dinosaurs may have ruled the Cretaceous, but their legacy endures in the birds that still sing today. Life is never lost entirely. It changes, adapts, and begins again. So sleep peacefully now, knowing that you are part of this endless story, carried forward by the same Earth that has always endured. For millions of years, the Cretaceous world was alive with color, sound, and movement. Dinosaurs grazed in herds across the plains, predators hunted with cunning and power, birds filled the skies, and marine reptiles ruled the seas. Flowering plants blossomed across the continents, insects buzzed in meadows, and forests of conifers and cycads stretched into the distance. It was a vibrant, abundant world, yet beneath all of its beauty, the Earth was moving quietly toward one of the most dramatic endings in its history. About 66 million years ago, the age of the great dinosaurs came to a sudden close. The cause was a cosmic visitor, an asteroid perhaps 10 kilometers wide that hurtled toward the Earth from deep space. For millions of years, it had drifted silently, unnoticed among the countless rocks of the solar system. Then, by chance and by the pull of gravity, its path crossed with ours. The Earth and the asteroid met in an instant, and the world was forever changed. The impact struck near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in modern Mexico. In a single moment, energy greater than billions of nuclear bombs was released. The asteroid punched into the crust, carving a crater more than 150 kilometers wide. The rock of the Earth itself vaporized, and molten debris was flung into the sky. Fires erupted across continents, shockwaves raced around the globe, and tsunamis taller than buildings swept across the oceans. The immediate destruction was only the beginning. As molten rock and ash rained down from the sky, wildfires spread across forests and plains. Animals fled, but there was nowhere to hide from the inferno. Then came the darkness. Dust, soot, and vapor rose high into the atmosphere, forming a thick layer that blocked sunlight. For months, perhaps even years, the Earth lay under a dim and cold shroud. Without sunlight, plants withered, flowers stopped blooming, and photosynthesis slowed to a halt. With plants dying, herbivores starved, and with herbivores gone, the predators soon followed. The balance of life collapsed. Dinosaurs that had ruled the Earth for more than 150 million years fell silent. Tyrannosaurus, Triceratops, and countless others disappeared forever. The skies, once filled with great pterosaurs, grew quiet. In the seas, mosasaurs and plesiosaurs vanished. Ammonites, those spiral-shelled drifters that had filled the oceans for hundreds of millions of years, were gone. It was one of the greatest mass extinctions the planet had ever known. And yet, even in this time of loss, some forms of life endured. Small mammals survived, hiding in burrows and feeding on seeds and insects. Birds, the descendants of small feathered dinosaurs, also survived, their adaptability allowing them to find food and shelter in a world of darkness. Crocodiles, turtles, and certain fish continued to thrive in rivers and lakes. Though most of the great dinosaurs were gone, their lineage lived on in the birds that still soar above us today. Imagine standing on the Earth in the days after the impact. The sky is dim, tinted with ash and smoke. The air is heavy, filled with the smell of burning forests. The land is scarred by fire, the seas churned by waves, the rivers clogged with debris. Silence hangs where once there was abundance. Herds of hadrosaurs no longer graze, and the mighty roar of predators is gone. It is a world emptied of giants, a world stunned by sudden loss. But even in that silence, seeds of renewal were already present. The plants that survived began to spread again. Ferns, hardy and adaptable, grew quickly across the burned landscapes, painting the land in green once more. Insects returned, feeding on what remained and spreading to new habitats. The small mammals, overlooked for so long in the shadow of the dinosaurs, began to thrive in the new world, filling the empty spaces left behind. Life, though wounded, began to rebuild. The asteroid was not the only force at work in this time. Volcanic activity in what is now India had already been releasing massive amounts of gas and lava, altering the climate. The Earth was already under stress, and the impact was the final blow that tipped the balance. Together, these events reshaped the planet, ending one age and beginning another. The loss of the dinosaurs was immense, but it was also a turning point. With the great reptiles gone, mammals had the opportunity to expand into new forms and sizes. Birds diversified, spreading into forests and skies, singing their first true songs. The Earth entered a new age, one that would eventually lead to the rise of primates and, much later, to humans. The ending of one world became the beginning of another. It is a reminder of the cycles of Earth's history. Creation and destruction are intertwined. Forests rise, then fall. Oceans fill with life, then empty, then fill again. Extinctions sweep across the planet, and yet survivors endure, carrying life forward into the next chapter. Each age leaves behind traces, written in rocks and fossils, telling the story of change. As you let this story settle in your mind, picture the resilience of life. Imagine small mammals scurrying through burned forests, feeding on seeds, hiding in burrows, enduring the cold and dark. Imagine birds taking flight above quiet landscapes, their wings carrying the memory of dinosaurs into the skies. Imagine rivers flowing once again, carrying nutrients to new growth, painting the land green with ferns and trees. The Earth remembers loss, but it also remembers recovery. Life always finds a way forward. So as you drift toward rest, think of this moment in Earth's history. It was a time of destruction, yes, but also a time of renewal. The dinosaurs had their long reign, but their end opened the door to the world that would eventually lead to us. Their story continues in every bird that flies, in every fossil that whispers of the past, and in the very Earth that has always endured. Close your eyes now and picture the sky clearing after long darkness. Sunlight returns, warming the soil. Plants stretch upward once more. Insects hum, birds call, and small creatures scurry in the undergrowth. The silence is broken by the sound of life returning. The Earth has begun a new chapter, and you, in your dreams, can wander through it, carried by the timeless rhythm of change. After the great asteroid struck the Earth and the age of the dinosaurs came to a close, the world entered a time of silence and recovery. The skies cleared slowly, the fires faded, and the Earth, as it always does, began to heal. For millions of years, giant reptiles had ruled the land, the seas, and the skies. With their sudden absence, the planet was left open for something new. Into this space stepped the mammals, small creatures that had survived in the shadows, waiting quietly for their moment. Before the extinction, mammals were modest. They were mostly small, living in burrows, hiding from predators, and feeding on insects, seeds, and small plants. They were clever and adaptable, but they could not compete with the size and power of the dinosaurs. Yet when the dinosaurs vanished, these little survivors found themselves in a world of opportunity. Forests began to regrow, rivers flowed once again, and meadows blossomed with flowers. The mammals emerged from hiding, ready to explore this new landscape. At first, mammals remained small, cautious in their steps. But with time, they began to diversify. Some grew larger, taking on new roles as grazers and hunters. Others remained small, but adapted to new environments, climbing trees, gliding through the air, or diving into water. Their bodies were warm-blooded, covered in fur, and able to regulate temperature in ways that helped them survive in varied climates. They cared for their young, nursing them with milk, a strategy that gave the next generation a better chance to survive. These traits, which had once kept them alive in the shadows, now allowed them to thrive in the open. The Paleocene period, beginning about 66 million years ago, was the first chapter of this mammalian age. The Earth was warmer than it is today, with forests spreading across much of the land. In these forests, mammals began to take on strange and wonderful forms. Some grew into creatures with long snouts and claws for digging insects. Others developed teeth for grinding plants. Some climbed into the trees, finding food and safety in the branches. It was an age of experimentation, as life tried new shapes, new strategies, and new possibilities. By the Eocene period, beginning about 56 million years ago, mammals had grown even more diverse. Forests covered much of the Earth, even near the poles. Imagine standing in a forest in what is now the Arctic, surrounded by tall trees and thick vegetation, with mammals moving among them. Horses the size of small dogs trotted through the undergrowth. Primates leapt through the branches, their hands gripping tightly as they swung from tree to tree. Strange hoofed mammals grazed on leaves and shoots, while predators with sharp teeth stalked them quietly. The world was alive with movement, filled with creatures both familiar and strange. Some mammals returned to the seas, beginning a transformation that would one day lead to whales and dolphins. These early ancestors still had legs and could walk on land, but they spent more and more time in the water, hunting fish and squid. Their bodies adapted, their limbs reshaping into paddles, their tails growing stronger for swimming. Over millions of years, they would become fully aquatic, filling the oceans with songs and movement. Other mammals grew large on land. Some became massive plant eaters, with heavy bodies and grinding teeth, shaping the forests and meadows around them. Their predators grew larger too, adapting to hunt these new giants. The balance of predator and prey that had defined the age of dinosaurs now continued with mammals, written in new forms, but with the same rhythm of survival and adaptation. The Earth itself was changing as well. The continents continued to drift, slowly moving toward the shapes we recognize today. The Atlantic Ocean widened, separating lands that had once been joined. Mountains rose where plates collided, and new climates formed. The shifting of continents carried animals into new environments where they evolved in different ways. Life was guided not only by its own creativity but also by the movements of the Earth itself. Imagine walking through one of these early mammalian worlds. You step into a dense forest, the air warm and filled with the scent of flowers. Small horses trot past, their hooves clicking softly on the ground. In the trees above, primates chatter as they leap from branch to branch. A large predator slips quietly through the shadows, its eyes fixed on prey. In a nearby river, an animal with legs and flippers dives into the water, chasing fish with surprising grace. Every corner of the forest is alive, a chorus of movement and sound. The mammals of this time may not have been as massive as the dinosaurs, but they were remarkable in their variety. Some looked like early versions of modern animals, while others were strange forms that would vanish in future ages. It was a time of creativity, of endless experiments, as life filled the Earth with new shapes. From tiny insect eaters to giant grazers, from tree dwellers to ocean swimmers, mammals explored every possibility, adapting to a world that had been reshaped by catastrophe. This adaptability was their greatest strength. Where the dinosaurs had been tied to certain forms, mammals were flexible, able to survive in forests, grasslands, deserts, and seas. Their intelligence and care for their young gave them advantages, allowing them to learn and adapt quickly. These traits would guide them through future challenges, carrying them forward through ice ages, extinctions, and shifting climates. It is humbling to think that in this time, long before humans, the ancestors of many creatures we know today were already taking shape. The first whales were learning to swim. The first horses were running through forests. The first primates were climbing trees. The seeds of the future were present, though no one could have known where they would lead. The earth was preparing for new chapters, carrying life forward patiently, as it always has. As you rest tonight, let yourself imagine drifting through this early age of mammals. Walk among forests where flowers bloom, listen to the calls of primates in the trees, and feel the ground tremble under the footsteps of new giants. Picture rivers winding through valleys, mountains rising in the distance, and oceans alive with creatures taking their first steps back into the water. It is a world alive with possibility, a world that whispers of the future while still carrying the memory of the past. And let that thought comfort you. The earth has always endured, and life has always adapted. From the smallest mammals hiding in burrows to the vast herds that would one day roam the plains, each step is part of the same story, a story that continues through you. Sleep now in the knowledge that you are connected to that story, safe in the embrace of a planet that carries its history with patience and grace. As the age of mammals unfolded, the earth entered a time of grandeur and scale. With the dinosaurs gone, mammals had the opportunity to grow larger than ever before, filling the world with new giants. In the forests, grasslands, and seas, colossal creatures appeared, shaping the landscapes around them and leaving behind a legacy of wonder. This was the age of massive mammals, an age when the earth echoed with the footsteps of titans once again. One of the most remarkable of these early giants was Paraceratherium, a relative of the rhinoceros. It was among the largest land mammals ever to live, standing taller than a giraffe and longer than a bus. Its neck was long and flexible, allowing it to browse on the tops of trees. Imagine walking across a plain where herds of these gentle giants moved slowly, their size alone keeping them safe from predators. They were peaceful browsers, their great bulk carried by sturdy legs, their presence a reminder that life had found new ways to create giants. In the oceans, mammals also grew to immense sizes. The ancestors of modern whales were already adapting fully to aquatic life. Creatures like Basilosaurus stretched nearly 20 meters long, their elongated bodies gliding gracefully through the seas. Though its name means king lizard, it was no reptile but a mammal, descended from land-dwelling ancestors that had returned to the water. Basilosaurus hunted fish and smaller marine animals, its powerful jaws filled with sharp teeth. To see one would have been to witness both beauty and terror, an immense creature moving silently beneath the waves. On land, predators also grew formidable. Giant carnivorous mammals evolved, some resembling great cats, others bearing long saber-shaped teeth. These predators hunted the herds of plant-eaters that roamed the plains and forests. Their presence kept the balance of life in motion, ensuring that no species grew unchecked. The rhythm of predator and prey that had defined the age of dinosaurs now continued with mammals, written in new forms but with the same timeless pattern. The earth itself was changing during this age. Grasslands began to spread, creating new habitats, unlike the forests that had dominated before. Grasses are tough plants, able to withstand grazing and regrow quickly. As they spread, they created vast open plains, reshaping ecosystems and driving mammals to adapt. Animals developed new teeth and digestive systems to feed on the tough grasses. Herds grew larger, and speed became more important, as open landscapes offered less shelter from predators. The rise of grasslands transformed life on land, creating the stage for some of the most iconic mammals in history. Horses evolved during this time, beginning as small forest dwellers no larger than a dog. As grasslands spread, they adapted, growing larger, developing stronger legs, and evolving teeth suited for grazing. Over millions of years, they became swift runners, able to escape predators across the open plains. Their story is one of transformation, from small and fragile creatures in the forests to powerful animals built for speed and endurance. Other mammals adapted in different ways. Elephants, with their long trunks and tusks, began to appear. Their ancestors spread across continents, some with straight tusks, others with curved ones, some small, others massive. Their trunks allowed them to grasp food with precision, while their tusks served as tools and weapons. They became symbols of strength and intelligence, their herds moving across grasslands and forests with quiet dignity. In the seas, whales continued their evolution. Some became filter feeders, opening their massive mouths to capture plankton and small fish in enormous gulps. Others remained hunters, chasing prey with speed and precision. Their songs may have already begun to echo through the oceans, carrying across vast distances, connecting individuals separated by hundreds of kilometers. The oceans had once belonged to reptiles, but now they were filled with the voices of mammals, a chorus that still exists today. The diversity of life during this time was astonishing. From the smallest rodents to the largest land mammals, from predators with saber-shaped teeth to gentle giants that grazed on trees, the earth was filled with variety. Each species played its role in the balance of ecosystems, shaping the land and sea around them. The story of life was one of abundance, of creativity, of endless adaptation. But as always, the earth was not still. Climates shifted, continents drifted, and new challenges arose. Ice ages came and went, covering much of the northern and southern hemispheres in glaciers. During these times, animals adapted once again. Some grew thick coats of fur to withstand the cold. Mammoths, with their shaggy hair and long curved tusks, roamed frozen plains in great herds. Saber-toothed cats stalked them, their powerful bodies built for ambush. Musk oxen, reindeer, and bison grazed across icy grasslands, their bodies resilient against the chill. These cycles of ice and warmth shaped life in profound ways. Animals migrated, adapted, and evolved in response to changing conditions. Some survived, while others vanished, unable to withstand the challenges. The earth, in its endless patience, continued to guide life through these transformations, carrying the story forward. Imagine walking across one of these ancient plains. The air is crisp, your breath visible in the cold. Ahead, a herd of mammoths moves slowly, their trunks swinging as they graze. Beside them, woolly rhinoceroses paw at the snow, uncovering grasses beneath. In the distance, a predator watches, its saber teeth gleaming as it waits for an opportunity. The ground trembles slightly under the weight of the herds, while the sky above is vast and clear, filled with the cries of birds that circle in the cold air. It is a world both harsh and beautiful, a world alive with strength and resilience. The age of massive mammals was one of grandeur and transformation. It was a time when the earth filled once again with giants, when herds roamed endlessly, and when predators hunted with patience and power. It was a time of adaptation, as grasslands spread, as ice ages came and went, and as mammals learned to thrive in every corner of the planet. As you rest, let these images soothe you. Picture the herds moving slowly across plains, the great whales gliding through oceans, the mammoths marching across frozen landscapes. Picture the quiet strength of elephants, the grace of horses, the patience of predators waiting in silence. Each image is part of the Earth's story, a reminder of its resilience, its creativity, and its endless capacity for renewal. And know that you are part of that story too. The same earth that carried mammoths and whales elephants and saber-toothed cats, now carries you. It has endured through fire, ice, and silence, and it will continue to endure. Sleep now, carried gently by the memory of giants, safe in the arms of a planet that has always known how to move forward. As the age of great mammals unfolded, the Earth continued its patient rhythm of change. The glaciers came and went, carving mountains and valleys, spreading ice and then retreating to reveal green plains once again. Through these shifting landscapes, many lineages rose and fell, but one small and curious group began to take quiet steps toward a future that would transform the planet in ways no other creature ever had. These were the primates, and though they began as modest forest dwellers, their story would eventually lead to the first humans. The earliest primates appeared more than 60 million years ago, not long after the age of dinosaurs had ended. They were small, tree-dwelling creatures, their hands and feet adapted for gripping branches. Their eyes faced forward, giving them depth perception, a useful skill for moving through dense forests. They were agile, cautious, and intelligent compared to many of their neighbors. In a world filled with larger and more imposing animals, these primates survived by climbing, leaping, and learning. They were not giants like mammoths or predators like saber-toothed cats, but they carried within them the seeds of curiosity and awareness. As millions of years passed, primates diversified. Some remained small and lived their lives in the treetops, leaping from branch to branch and feeding on fruits and insects. Others grew larger, exploring new ways of life. Their intelligence allowed them to adapt to changing environments. They formed social groups, caring for one another and raising their young with attention. These behaviors, though simple at first, were the beginning of something profound. Cooperation and learning became as important to their survival as claws or teeth. Imagine walking through one of these ancient forests. The air is warm and humid, the trees rising high above, their branches woven together to form a green canopy. Small primates dart through the branches, their eyes bright, their hands reaching for fruit. They call to one another with sounds that echo through the trees, forming the first threads of communication. In the shadows, predators prowl, but the primates move quickly, retreating to the safety of higher branches. Life here is full of movement and sound, a delicate balance of danger and opportunity. Over time, some primates ventured out of the dense forests and into more open landscapes. Grasslands spread across the earth, and these environments demanded new adaptations. Some primates learned to walk upright for short distances, freeing their hands to carry food or use simple tools. Their eyes scanned the horizon for predators, and their minds began to imagine new possibilities. The forests had shaped their bodies, but the grasslands would shape their future. The Miocene epoch, beginning about 23 million years ago, was a turning point. During this time, primates diversified further, and the ancestors of apes and humans began to appear. Some of these apes grew large and powerful, living in forests and feeding on leaves, fruits, and seeds. Others developed smaller, more flexible bodies, better suited for mixed environments of trees and open ground. Social bonds became stronger, communication more complex, and intelligence more refined. The path toward humanity was still long and uncertain, but the first steps were being taken. The Earth itself played a role in guiding this story. As continents drifted and climates shifted, some regions became drier, forcing primates to adapt. Those that could not adjust remained in shrinking forests, while others ventured into savannas where survival required new skills. Walking upright became more common, allowing individuals to carry food and see above tall grasses. Hands, once used only for climbing, now began to shape tools, turning stones and sticks into extensions of thought. These small beginnings would one day grow into the foundation of human culture. At this stage, there were no humans yet, only ancestors. They were creatures that looked partly familiar and partly alien, their faces hinting at our own, their movements echoing what we would one day perfect. They lived in groups, caring for one another, protecting their young, and passing down simple knowledge. They were vulnerable compared to the massive predators of their time, yet their adaptability kept them alive. They were creatures of patience, learning slowly across generations, guided by curiosity and necessity. Imagine a group of these early ancestors gathered near a river. The air is warm, the grass sways in the breeze, and the sound of insects hums in the distance. One individual lifts a stone, using it to crack open a nut, while others watch closely, learning through observation. A child clings to its mother, wide-eyed and curious. The group communicates through calls and gestures, their voices rising and falling like music in the open air. They are not yet human, but they are something more than animal, standing at the threshold of a new age. The rise of primates and their ancestors reminds us that intelligence was not inevitable but the result of countless small adaptations. The shape of hands, the position of eyes, the ability to walk upright, the capacity for cooperation, each step was guided by chance and necessity. No single moment made humans, but together, these changes created the possibility. The earth, patient and timeless, provided the stage, while life slowly wrote the story. Other mammals continued to thrive alongside these ancestors. Mammoths still roamed, saber-toothed cats still hunted, and countless other species filled the forests, plains, and seas. The world was abundant, diverse, and alive with motion. Humans had not yet arrived, but the conditions for their emergence were being prepared. The earth was guiding life toward a future that no creature could have imagined, yet one that was already written in the slow unfolding of time. As you let these images settle in your mind, think of the resilience and patience that shaped this story. The earth had seen the rise and fall of dinosaurs, the reign of giant mammals, the endless cycles of ice and warmth. Through it all, small primates clung to trees, learning, adapting, and waiting. Their story was one of quiet persistence, of survival through intelligence and cooperation. And so, as you rest, imagine drifting through those ancient forests and grasslands. Picture small primates leaping through trees, their calls echoing in the air. Picture early ancestors walking upright on the savanna, carrying food in their hands, watching the horizon for danger. Picture the first sparks of curiosity and awareness, fragile yet powerful, glowing in the minds of creatures who did not yet know what they would become. Let that thought soothe you. Humanity's story is part of a much larger story, one that began billions of years before us and will continue long after. You are carried within that story, connected to the primates that first leapt through trees, to the ancestors that first lifted stones, to the earth itself, which has always endured. Sleep now in the comfort of knowing that you are part of this unbroken chain, safe in the embrace of time and memory. The long journey we have taken together through the story of the earth is almost at its end. From the fiery beginnings of a young planet to the first drops of water that formed oceans, from single-celled organisms to forests, insects, reptiles, and great dinosaurs, from mammoths to the first primates, every age has left its mark. Now we stand at the threshold of the most recent chapter, the rise of humans. But before we end, let us linger for a while in the quiet reflection of what came before, because the story of Earth before humans is not only about creatures long vanished. It is about the patience of time, the endurance of life, and the beauty of change. Think of the first oceans, still and strange, filled with tiny sparks of life that glowed in the darkness. Imagine how fragile those early forms were, yet how determined they were to survive. From them came creatures that swam with eyes and fins, that crawled onto land, that learned to fly. Each step was slow, measured not in years but in millions of years. Life did not hurry, for the earth itself moves in rhythms that stretch beyond imagination. Think of the forests that grew across continents, towering trees that shaded insects as large as birds, amphibians that croaked in swampy waters, and reptiles that learned to live far from the seas. The air grew richer, the land greener, and the earth more alive with every passing age. Imagine how quiet those forests would have sounded, only to be broken by the rustle of giant wings or the footsteps of ancient creatures moving through the undergrowth. Think of the age of the dinosaurs, those long-necked sauropods that walked like living mountains, the sharp-toothed predators that hunted them, and the smaller feathered forms that leapt into the air on wings. Imagine the skies filled with pterosaurs, the seas alive with plesiosaurs and mosasaurs, the land echoing with the sound of herds moving across plains. For more than 150 million years, these creatures thrived, living their lives as naturally and completely as we live ours now. Their world is gone, but its memory endures in stone and in the wings of every bird that flies today. Think of the asteroid that struck with such force that it ended an age, the fires that spread, the skies that darkened, the silence that followed. And then, the slow regrowth, the ferns that spread across burned ground, the small mammals that emerged from hiding, the birds that sang into a quiet sky. Even in endings, the earth carried within it the seeds of new beginnings. Think of the age of mammals, when elephants and mammoths walked the plains, when saber-toothed cats waited in the shadows, when whales sang in the seas. Think of the grasslands spreading across continents, bringing with them speed and endurance, shaping horses, antelope, and countless grazers. Think of the ice ages, when glaciers carved valleys and rivers, when woolly giants roamed frozen landscapes, when life once again adapted to change. And finally, think of the primates, climbing trees, leaping through branches, and beginning to walk across open ground. Think of the first spark of curiosity in their minds, the first tools shaped from stone, the first groups gathered around rivers. They were not yet human, but they carried within them the promise of what was to come. From their patience and persistence came the story we know as our own. The story of Earth before humans is not a separate tale. It is the foundation of everything that exists today. The air we breathe was shaped by ancient forests. The coal and oil that fuel our world were formed from plants that lived hundreds of millions of years ago. The mountains we see were once ocean floors, lifted by the slow movement of continents. The birds outside our windows carry the memory of dinosaurs. Every step we take is on ground that holds the memory of countless ages. And as you rest, let this thought bring you peace. The earth has always endured, through fire and ice, through silence and storms, through endings and renewals. Life has found a way to continue. You are part of that same story, connected by breath, by water, by soil, by time itself. The patience of the earth is in you, and its resilience is in you as well. Close your eyes now and imagine drifting backward through the ages. Picture oceans glowing with early life, forests alive with insects and amphibians, plains trembling with the steps of dinosaurs, and ice fields stretching to the horizon. See each age not as something lost, but as something still alive in the memory of the planet. Let yourself wander there, gently, calmly, without hurry, carried as if on a current of time. And now, come back to the present, to the quiet night around you, to the steady rhythm of your own breath. You are here, alive in this moment, resting in the long story of the Earth. The planet holds you as it has held every creature before you, with patience and care. So let go of your thoughts, let the weight of the day fade away, and let sleep come softly. May your dreams be filled with oceans and forests, with herds and wings, with stars above and rivers below. May you feel the comfort of knowing that you are part of a timeless story, safe in the embrace of a planet that has always known how to endure. Good night, dear listener. Sleep well, and may the memory of the Earth carry you gently into peace.